My late aunt's house only tapped during storms. The tapping began during the first storm. I had been living in Aunt Vivian's house for 9 days, though living was generous. Most of my clothes were still in boxes, the kitchen table was buried beneath legal documents, and every room smelled faintly of dust and furniture polish. The house stood at the end of a narrow road outside a town called Arden Falls. It was older than anything I had ever owned, with uneven pine floors, tall windows, and a steep roof that groaned whenever the wind changed direction. Vivian had lived there alone for 32 years. When she died, she left it to me. No explanation. We had not been especially close. She was my mother's older sister, the relative who sent birthday cards without personal messages and attended family gatherings only when she could leave before dessert. Still, the inheritance arrived at the exact moment I needed somewhere to go. My marriage had ended 3 months earlier. I had left our apartment with 2 suitcases, a coffee maker, and no clear idea of what came next. Then Vivian's lawyer called. The first storm rolled in just after midnight. Rain struck the windows in hard, slanting bursts. Wind pushed through the trees surrounding the house, bending branches against the roof. I was in the upstairs bedroom trying to sleep when I heard 3 faint knocks. Tap, tap, tap. I opened my eyes. The sound had come from the wall beside the bed. I waited, nothing. Then it came again. Tap, 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 not pipes, not branches. The rhythm was too even. I switched on the lamp and pressed my palm against the faded wallpaper. The plaster felt cool and solid. Another gust hit the house. The tapping stopped. I told myself old houses made noises. Wood expanded. Pipes shook. Water found strange routes through walls. Then thunder rolled across the valley. Tap, tap, tap. I moved the bed away from the wall and listened until nearly 4 in the morning. The sound always came in groups of 3. By sunrise, the storm had passed. So had the tapping. I spent the next morning examining the outside of the house. The bedroom wall faced north. There were no trees close enough to touch it, no loose shutters, no gutters near the place where I had heard the sound. The siding was weathered but intact. I climbed into the attic with a flashlight. The attic ran the length of the house, packed with trunks, old lamps, and boxes labeled in Vivian's small, precise handwriting. Dust covered everything evenly. Nothing appeared disturbed. Above the bedroom, the rafters were dry. No animals, no loose wires. No obvious explanation. I nearly forgot about it. Then another storm came 4 nights later. This time, I was downstairs. The rain had started before dinner and intensified after dark. I was standing at the kitchen counter when the tapping began. Tap, tap, tap. It came from the dining room. I followed it. The dining room shared the same north wall as the bedroom above it. Vivian's long oak sideboard stood against that wall, beneath a framed landscape painting. The tapping sounded behind the painting. I took it down. The wallpaper underneath was slightly lighter, but otherwise unremarkable. Tap, tap, tap. I held my ear against the plaster. The sound was not on the surface. It came from deeper inside. I moved the sideboard away from the wall. Its legs scraped loudly across the floor. Behind it, the baseboard had been cut into 2 sections. At first, I thought it was ordinary repair work. Then I noticed the screws. The rest of the baseboards had been nailed into place. This section had 4 brass screws, their heads painted to match the wood. I found a screwdriver in the kitchen drawer. The screws came out easily. Behind the baseboard was a narrow, rectangular opening. Cold air moved through it. I shone my flashlight inside and saw a gap between the plaster and the exterior wall. It was wider than it should have been, perhaps 10 inches deep. Something metallic gleamed inside. I reached in but could not touch it. The tapping continued farther up the wall. Tap, tap, tap. I slid my phone into the opening and took several photographs with the flash. The first showed wooden studs and old insulation. The second showed a thin metal rod. The third showed what looked like a cable running vertically through the wall. I stopped. Old houses had electrical wires, but this was not electrical cable. It was braided steel, dark with age, attached to the rod by a small hinge. The storm weakened around 2 in the morning. The tapping slowed, then stopped completely. The next day, I called a contractor named Ross Delaney. His number was on a receipt I found in Vivian's desk. He arrived that afternoon in a white truck with ladders strapped to the roof. He was in his late 50s, broad-shouldered, with gray hair and a habit of examining things before answering questions. I showed him the opening behind the baseboard. He crouched and aimed a work light into the wall. "That cable shouldn't be there," he said. "What is it?" "I don't know yet." He went outside, measured the wall, then measured the dining room. When he returned, his expression had changed. "This room is smaller than the outside dimensions." "By how much?" "Almost 2 feet." I looked toward the wall. "You're saying there's space behind it?" "A narrow cavity. Runs higher than this room, too." "Why would anyone build that?" Ross stood and brushed dust from his knees. "They probably didn't." He explained that the house had been renovated sometime in the middle of the 20th century. The north interior wall was newer than the original structure. Someone had built a second wall inside the first, creating a hidden vertical space between them. "Can you open it?" I asked. "Yes," he hesitated. "But before I do, I should tell you something." He pointed to the wallpaper above the removed baseboard. "There are no seams." "I don't understand." Wallpaper was installed after the false wall was built. Whoever did this didn't intend for it to be temporary. He returned the next morning with tools and a small inspection camera. The sky was clear. The tapping did not return. Ross fed the camera through the opening while I watched the screen. At first, we saw only dust and timber. Then the camera rose. The steel cable ran upward through a series of guides attached to the studs. Every few feet, a short metal arm extended toward the original exterior wall. "What are those?" I asked. "Strikers." "For what?" He adjusted the camera. A small brass plate appeared on the screen. When the cable moved, the metal arm would strike it. Tap. The camera continued upward. There were several more plates, positioned behind the dining room and the bedroom. "This was built to make that sound," I said. Ross nodded slowly. "But what moves the cable?" "That's what we need to find." The cable did not end in the attic. It continued downward. We followed it into the basement. Vivian's basement was divided into 3 rooms: a laundry area, a furnace room, and a storage room with stone walls and a low ceiling. Ross measured again. The hidden cavity ended behind the furnace room. A large wooden cabinet stood against the wall there. It was bolted to the concrete floor. The cabinet contained old paint cans, jars of nails, and several folded tarps. Ross removed the contents and found 4 bolts running through the back panel. Behind the cabinet was a small iron door. It had no knob, only a circular hole where a key mechanism might once have been. Ross stared at it. "Did you know this was here?" "No." He tried to pry it open, but the frame had been set into the stone. "I can cut through it," he said, "but not without damaging whatever is behind it." I remembered the attic boxes. Vivian labeled everything: tax records, winter linens, kitchen receipts. House repairs. I spent 2 hours searching until I found a narrow wooden box beneath a stack of old magazines. Inside were 17 keys. Each had a paper tag: front door, back door, garage, desk, safe deposit box. The final key had no label. It was blackened steel, longer than the others, with a round, hollow shaft. It fit the iron door. The lock turned with a heavy click. Ross pulled. The door opened inward. Behind it was a chamber no larger than a closet. The walls were brick. The floor was packed earth. In the center stood a rusted metal mechanism connected to the steel cable. It looked like part of an old clock: gears, levers, and a vertical arm with a weighted end. A pipe entered through the outer wall near the ceiling. Below it sat a shallow copper basin. Ross leaned closer. Rainwater. The basin was mounted on a pivot. When enough water entered through the pipe, its weight pulled a chain. The chain turned the first gear, which moved the cable. "And the tapping?" I asked. "Each time the basin fills, it tips. The cable rises, the strikers hit the plates, and the water drains away. Then it fills again." Exactly. The mechanism was simple, deliberate. Someone had designed the wall to tap only during heavy rain, but that did not answer the most important question. Why? Ross examined the chamber while I held the flashlight. There was no furniture, no trunk, no hidden passage, only the rain mechanism. Then he noticed a rectangular patch of mortar in the back wall. The surrounding bricks were old and irregular. The patch was smoother and several shades lighter. "That was sealed later," he said. He tapped it with the handle of his screwdriver. The sound was hollow. "What's behind it?" One way to find out. He removed the mortar carefully, then pulled out 3 bricks. Inside was a small compartment. A metal box sat within it. The box had no lock. I lifted the lid. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. They showed the house from different angles and in different years. Some were black and white, others had faded color. Several showed people standing in front of the north wall while it was being rebuilt. A young Vivian appeared in many of them. Beside her stood a man I recognized as my grandfather. My mother was there too. She could not have been more than 14. At the bottom of the box was a folded blueprint. It showed the original floor plan of the house. There was no false wall. No hidden cavity. No chamber. Across the north side of the blueprint, someone had drawn a thick red line. Beside it were 3 handwritten words. "Keep IT covered." Ross read them over my shoulder. Covered from what? I looked through the photographs again. One image showed the wall before construction began. The plaster had been removed. Behind it was a large black rectangle, not a doorway. Something painted directly onto the original wood. I brought the photograph closer. The rectangle contained faint white marks arranged in columns. Names, dates. Numbers. The image was too blurred to read. Ross left just before sunset. He wanted to return with better lighting and remove part of the interior wall. I told him to wait. The house no longer felt merely old. It felt edited. Someone had changed its dimensions, sealed away its original wall, and built a machine to draw attention to it during storms. The tapping was not meant to frighten anyone. It was meant to be noticed. That evening, I called my mother. She answered on the 5th ring. "Are you settled in?" she asked. "I found something in the basement." Silence. "A mechanism," I continued. "It makes tapping sounds inside the north wall when it rains." Her breathing changed. It was slight, but I heard it. "What have you opened?" she asked. "Why would you ask that?" Vivian kept that house in poor condition. "There could be mold, old wiring. You shouldn't tear into walls without knowing." "I found photographs of you." She stopped. "You were standing beside Granddad while the false wall was being built." Another silence. Then she said, "Leave it alone." Her voice was low and controlled. "What is behind the wall? Nothing that concerns you. It concerns me if it's inside my house. It was never supposed to become your house." The words landed harder than I expected. Vivian left it to me. She made a mistake. "Did she?" My mother exhaled. "I'm coming tomorrow. Tell me now. Do not open that wall." She ended the call. I barely slept. At 3 in the morning, I went to Vivian's study. It was the only room I had not fully searched. The desk drawers contained household accounts, insurance policies, and receipts arranged by year. Nothing appeared personal. Then I noticed that the bottom drawer was shallower than the others. I removed it. Behind it was a flat envelope taped to the back panel. Inside was a newspaper clipping dated April 18, 1976. "Local girl missing after flood." The article described a 16-year-old named Celia Ward who had disappeared during a violent storm. She had last been seen walking toward Arden Falls after leaving a school dance. Search teams found one of her shoes near the river. Her body was never recovered. The photograph beside the article showed a dark-haired girl smiling at the camera. I knew her face, not from family photographs, from the pictures inside the basement wall. Celia appeared in 3 of them. In one, she stood beside my mother. In another, she sat on the porch steps with Vivian. In the third, she faced the north wall while my grandfather painted the black rectangle behind her. I examined the clipping again. Celia disappeared in 1976. The photographs of the wall construction were dated 1978, 2 years later. At 7 the next morning, I called Ross and told him to come immediately. My mother arrived first. She pulled into the driveway just after 8, stepped from her car, and stared at the house as though she had expected never to see it again. She was 71, but anger made her move quickly. "Where is the box?" she asked as soon as she entered. "You knew it was there." "Where is it?" I led her into the dining room. The removed baseboard lay on the floor. The opening in the wall seemed much darker than it had the night before. My mother's face tightened. "You had no right. I own the house. You don't understand what you've disturbed. Then explain it. She looked toward the windows. Is anyone else here? A contractor is coming. You need to cancel him. I'm not canceling anything. She closed her eyes. For several seconds, she seemed less angry than exhausted. Then she sat at the dining table. Celia Ward was my best friend, she said. I remained standing. I found the article. The newspaper got most of it wrong. What did they get wrong? She didn't walk toward town after the dance. Vivian picked us up. Us, Celia and me. My mother folded her hands tightly. There had been flooding for 2 days. Roads were closing. Vivian was 26 and had just started teaching at our school. She knew we weren't supposed to be at the dance, so she offered to drive Celia home before our parents found out. What happened? We never reached her house. The car stalled where the lower road crossed the river. Water rose over the tires within minutes. Vivian told the girls to climb through the windows and hold onto the roof. The current swept Celia away. My mother and Vivian survived by reaching a tree. That sounds like an accident, I said. It was. Then why hide it? Because Vivian had been drinking. I stared at her. She wasn't drunk, my mother said quickly, but she had alcohol in her system. She was a new teacher. Celia's parents already hated her because Celia spent so much time here. Here? My mother glanced at the north wall. This house belonged to our parents then. Your grandfather ran a printing business from the back room. Vivian helped him. Celia helped too. What were they printing? Her eyes met mine. Evidence. The word changed the room. My grandfather had taken private printing jobs for local businesses. Through that work, he discovered that several town officials were altering land records after floods. Properties damaged by water were declared abandoned, purchased through shell companies, and resold at enormous profit. Celia's father worked in the county records office. He had given her copies of documents because he feared someone was watching him. She brought them here, my mother said. Vivian and your grandfather photographed everything. They copied names, dates, parcel numbers, payments. The writing on the wall, she nodded. Your grandfather used it to organize the evidence. He painted the entire scheme across that wall so they could see how everything connected. Why not use paper? They did. But papers could be stolen. The wall was the master record. I looked at the hidden space. And after Celia died, her father panicked. He told the police she had stolen county documents. He said Vivian had encouraged her. He blamed everyone except the people who were actually responsible. Were those people responsible for her death? No, she answered too quickly. I heard it. You're leaving something out. My mother stood. This is why the wall was covered. Every question leads to another accusation. Celia died in the river. Vivian made a terrible decision, and she spent the rest of her life paying for it. Then why build the tapping mechanism? She did not answer. The front door opened. Ross called my name from the hallway. My mother turned toward the sound. You told him to come after I asked you not to. You still haven't told me what's behind the wall. I just did. No, you told me what used to be written on it. Ross entered carrying a tool case. He glanced between us. Bad time? No, I said. Open the wall. My mother stepped in front of him. You cannot. Ross looked at me. This is her house, I said. My mother's shoulders dropped. She moved away. Ross began near the baseboard, cutting a narrow vertical section through the plaster. The wall had been constructed with unusually thick boards beneath it. Removing the first section took nearly an hour. Behind it was darkness. Then the original wall appeared. Black paint covered the wood from floor to ceiling. White lettering stretched across it in careful columns. Most had faded, but much remained readable. Parcel numbers, property owners, bank accounts, payments, names, arrows connected one entry to another. The wall was not simply a list, it was a map of corruption. Ross widened the opening. My mother sat silently at the table. I moved my flashlight over the names until one stopped me. Edward Ward, Celia's father. A line connected his name to 3 shell companies. Another connected him to the county commissioner. He was involved, I said. My mother did not look up. Celia's father wasn't exposing the scheme. He was part of it. Yes. Then why did he give her the records? He didn't. The answer came from behind me. Ross had exposed another section of wall. At the center was a sentence written in larger letters. Celia copied the files. Below it, Edward knows, I turned. Celia discovered what her father was doing. My mother's eyes filled with tears. She thought she could stop him, and she brought the evidence here. Yes, did he know? Not at first. But he found out. My mother nodded. The storm had not killed Celia by accident, not entirely. Edward Ward followed them from the dance. He tried to force Vivian's car off the road before they could reach the state police office 2 towns away. The cars collided near the flooded crossing. Vivian's vehicle stalled in the water. Edward drove away. He left you there? I asked. He watched from the hill, my mother said. He saw the water rise. He saw us climb onto the roof. And Celia, her voice broke, she was holding my hand. I pictured 2 girls clinging to a sinking car in black floodwater. Then another vehicle came, my mother said. Who? Your grandfather. He had been waiting for Vivian to return. When she did not, he searched the road and found Edward's car parked above the crossing. My grandfather pulled Vivian and my mother from the tree. Celia was already gone. He saw Edward? I asked. Yes, then why didn't he tell the police? Because Edward told him what would happen. Edward had influence inside the sheriff's department. He knew Vivian had been drinking. He knew my grandfather had copied confidential county records. He threatened to accuse them of kidnapping Celia, stealing government documents, and causing the crash. He said the evidence would disappear, my mother continued. He said Vivian would go to prison, and I would be taken away from my parents. So Granddad covered the wall. He built the false wall with Vivian. They hid the photographs and the mechanism. I looked toward the exposed gears in the basement doorway. The tapping was supposed to lead someone here, only if it became necessary. What does that mean? My mother shook her head. I don't know. I believed her. For the first time since she arrived, her confusion seemed genuine. Ross removed another board. Behind it, close to the floor, was a small metal plate attached to the original wall. The plate contained 3 circular holes. One held the steel cable, the other 2 were empty. Ross crouched. There were more mechanisms. What kind? I can't tell. He traced the holes with one finger. The tapping cable is still here. Whatever ran through these was removed. My mother stood. Vivian changed something. When? She renovated the house again after your grandfather died. Why? She never said. Ross directed his light upward. The white markings continued toward the ceiling, but a section near the top had been painted over with newer black paint. A fresh layer concealed part of the original record. The paint was not truly fresh, but it was decades newer than the rest. Ross set up a ladder. He scraped gently at one corner. Beneath the newer paint were more words, not names this time. Instructions, north window, 3rd brick, storm drain. My mother read them aloud. I've never seen that. Ross descended. What's outside the north window? The dining room's north window faced a narrow strip of ground between the house and a stone retaining wall. Ivy covered most of the stones. We went outside. The sky had darkened while we worked. Heavy clouds gathered over the hills. The 3rd brick beneath the window was not a brick at all. It was a metal cover painted red-brown. Ross pried it loose. Inside was the end of a narrow pipe. It connected to one of the empty openings in the wall plate. A wire had been pulled through it recently enough that the dust inside was disturbed. Recently? I asked. Ross examined the edges. Within the last few years, maybe less. Vivian had been 78 when she died. What had she removed? We followed the retaining wall downhill until we reached a rusted grate near the road. The storm drain. The grate was too heavy to lift without tools. Ross returned to his truck for a crowbar. The first drops of rain began to fall. My mother stood beneath the trees, staring at the drain. She left you the house because she knew, she said. Knew what? That you wouldn't stop. Thunder sounded in the distance. Ross lifted the grate. Beneath it, the drain descended into a concrete channel. Water trickled through leaves and mud. Bolted to one side was a waterproof metal cylinder. A thin cable ran from it into the pipe leading back toward the house, the second missing mechanism. Ross unfastened the cylinder and handed it to me. Inside was a roll of microfilm sealed in plastic. My mother covered her mouth. Vivian kept copies. Copies of what? The records, the photographs. Everything. Why hide them in a storm drain? Because no one would search there. Rain began striking the road. Behind us, inside the house, the tapping started. Tap, tap, tap. The sound carried faintly through the open dining room window. It no longer felt like a warning. It felt like a signal. Ross turned the cylinder over. There's something engraved here. Mud obscured the surface. He wiped it clean. 3 words appeared. When the wall answers. I remembered the tapping groups. Always 3. The message was not predicting that someone would find the cylinder. It was an instruction built into the house. When the wall answered, look to the storm drain. But the microfilm was more than 40 years old. Why had Vivian waited so long to reveal it? We returned inside as the rain intensified. Ross set the cylinder on the dining table. My mother touched it but did not open the plastic. Edward died in 1998, she said. Most of the officials named on that wall are dead. Then Vivian wasn't afraid of them anymore. No, maybe she was afraid of someone else. I studied the exposed writing. The arrows and names ended near the section Vivian had painted over. Ross climbed the ladder again and continued scraping. More words emerged. One name appeared beneath the black paint. Martin Vale. I recognized it immediately. Martin Vale had been Vivian's lawyer, the man who handled her estate. The man who called to tell me I had inherited the house. A line connected his name to one of the shell companies. My mother looked stunned. He would have been a child. He wasn't involved in 1976, I said, but maybe his father was. Ross uncovered smaller writing beneath the name. Son has the deeds. I called Martin's office. His assistant said he was unavailable. I called again from a different number. This time, Martin answered. I'm at Vivian's house, I said. A pause followed. I assumed you were. How? Your mother called me. My mother shook her head. I didn't, Martin continued before I could respond. You've opened the north wall. It was not a question. I looked at the dining room window. Rain streamed down the glass. How do you know about the wall? Vivian told me. When? Years ago. Why? She wanted legal advice. About evidence linking your family to stolen properties? He sighed. My father represented several of the people involved. He inherited documents after their deaths. So did I. Did Vivian know you had them? Yes. Why didn't she turn everything over to the police? Because proving fraud from 50 years ago is difficult. Many properties changed owners repeatedly. Innocent families live in those homes now. That didn't answer my question. No, he said. It didn't. The tapping continued behind me. Tap, tap, tap. Martin lowered his voice. Listen carefully. Do not remove anything else from that wall. Why? Because Vivian did not build the mechanism. I looked at my mother. She was close enough to hear. My grandfather built it, I said. No. He built the false wall. The rain mechanism was added later. By Vivian? No. Then who? I don't know. The line went dead. A sound came from the basement, metal scraping against stone. Ross grabbed his flashlight. We moved through the kitchen and down the stairs. The iron door behind the cabinet stood open. The rain mechanism was moving. Water entered the copper basin. The gears turned. The cable rose. But a second lever had also begun to move. It had been hidden behind the first gear. Each time the basin tipped, the lever pushed against a brick in the side wall. On the third cycle, the brick shifted. A section of the chamber wall moved inward. Ross pulled it free. Behind it was a narrow tube containing another object wrapped in oilcloth. Inside the cloth was a cassette tape. A paper label had been fixed to its case. Vivian, May 3, 2026. My aunt had recorded it 3 weeks before her death. We found an old cassette player in the attic. The tape began with several seconds of static. Then Vivian spoke. Her voice was weaker than I remembered, but unmistakable. My father built the wall to hide the evidence, she said. I built the tapping mechanism after he died. Martin had lied. Vivian explained that she no longer trusted banks, lawyers, or locked rooms. Anything that required a key could be opened by the wrong person. Anything written in a will could be intercepted, but the tapping mechanism was part of the house itself. Only heavy rain activated it. Only someone sleeping in the house would hear it. She had intended the sound to lead to the wall and the wall to the microfilm. I waited too long, she said. At first, I was protecting your mother. Then I told myself I was protecting families who had bought stolen land without knowing. Later, I was only protecting myself from admitting what fear had made me become. My mother began to cry silently. Vivian continued. Edward Ward did not merely abandon us in the flood. He took Celia's documents from the car before he drove away. My father believed all the copies were lost. But one copy survived. Celia had hidden several pages inside the lining of her coat. The coat was found downstream 2 weeks after her disappearance. Vivian recovered the pages before police took possession of it. Those pages proved Edward had created the scheme. They also contained something else: a handwritten agreement transferring several stolen properties to a trust. The trust remained active. Its current administrator was Martin Vale. Vivian's voice became quieter. Martin knows the wall exists. He does not know what remains behind it. He believes I destroyed Celia's final pages. I looked at the cassette player. The tape hissed. He has spent years acquiring the properties listed in that trust, some through legitimate sales, some through pressure. He cannot complete the transfer without the original agreement. My mother looked toward the hidden chamber. "Where is it?" she whispered. Vivian answered as though she had heard her. "The wall has one final layer." The tape clicked, then stopped. We returned to the dining room. Rain hammered the roof. The exposed black wall glistened where damp air touched it. One final layer. Ross inspected the boards, the writing, and the metal plate. "There's nothing else behind this section," he said. I read Vivian's instructions again. North window, third brick, storm drain. Those led to the microfilm. The tapping led to the cassette. But the final pages had to be somewhere Martin could not find them even if he opened the wall. I stepped back. The words on the black surface were not random. The wall mapped properties, payments, and names. Celia had designed the connections. Every arrow led outward from Edward Ward, except one. A thin white line near the floor ran away from the network and ended beneath the window. No name, no number, just a small square. I knelt. The square was painted over a knot in the original wood. I pressed it. Nothing happened. Then the cable behind the wall rose again. Tap, tap, tap. On the third tap, the knot moved. A narrow wooden panel released from the wall. Inside was a folded packet wrapped in waxed cloth. My mother sat down heavily. Ross said nothing. I unwrapped it. The first page was an agreement signed by Edward Ward, 2 county officials, and Martin Vale's father. The second listed 12 properties. The third contained Celia's handwriting. She had documented dates, conversations, and payments. At the bottom, she had written that she intended to take everything to the state attorney. The final page was not part of the agreement. It was a letter addressed to Vivian. It did not predict who would find it. It did not explain the whole mystery. It contained only an apology. Celia had suspected her father knew she had copied the records. She had asked Vivian to drive her to the police without telling my mother why. She knew there might be danger. She brought my mother anyway. My mother read that part twice. For 50 years, she had believed Celia died because Vivian had been drinking, because Edward had followed them, because the road flooded. Now she understood that Celia had made a frightened, imperfect choice too. No one person had caused everything, but several people had chosen silence afterward. A car door slammed outside. Ross turned toward the window. Martin Vale ran through the rain toward the house. He entered without knocking. His suit was soaked. Mud covered his shoes. When he saw the packet in my hands, his expression changed. Not surprise, recognition. "Give me that," he said. "No, you don't understand what it will do. It will prove your family profited from stolen property. It will destroy people who had nothing to do with it. Then a court can decide that." He stepped closer. Ross moved between us. Martin stopped. "You think Vivian wanted this exposed?" he asked. "She had 50 years. She recorded a tape 3 weeks before she died." His eyes shifted toward the cassette player. For the first time, he looked afraid. "She knew you were still acquiring the properties," I said. Martin's face hardened. "My father left me a legal disaster. I spent my life containing it, by buying the remaining properties, by preventing hundreds of lawsuits. Who told you we opened the wall?" He glanced at my mother. She shook her head. Then I understood. Martin had not learned about it that morning. He had been monitoring the house. The third missing mechanism. One cable ran to the storm drain. One operated the hidden compartment. The third opening in the metal plate had once carried something else, A wire. Vivian had removed it recently. I remembered the pipe outside the north window. Dust inside it had been disturbed. You installed a sensor, I said. Martin said nothing. Something that alerted you when the mechanism moved. Ross looked toward the basement. That would explain the missing wire. Martin's silence confirmed it. He had known about the tapping system for years. He did not know exactly what it revealed, so he attached a sensor to the cable. When a storm activated the wall, he received an alert. As long as Vivian lived there, the signal meant nothing. But after her death, it meant someone new had heard the tapping. You came because the wall answered, I said. Martin looked at the packet. I came to protect my clients. Yourself. He took another step. Ross raised his phone. I've already called the sheriff, he said. That was not true. I knew because there had been no signal in the basement. But Martin believed him. He backed away. You'll regret this, he said. No, my mother replied. Her voice was steady now. We already regret what silence did. Martin left before the sheriff arrived. I had made the call while Ross followed him outside and photographed his license plate. The documents triggered a state investigation that lasted months. Some claims were too old to prosecute. Others were not. Martin lost his law license after investigators found he had used the trust to pressure elderly owners into selling land below market value. The properties were not taken from innocent families. A compensation fund was created using assets seized from the trust. Celia Ward's disappearance remained officially classified as a drowning. There was no way to prove Edward had intended to kill anyone, but the public record was corrected. He had caused the crash. He had abandoned the girls in floodwater. He had lied afterward to protect himself. My mother gave a statement. For the first time in 50 years, she told the entire story. I kept Vivian's house. Ross repaired the opening in the dining room, but left a framed section of the original black wall visible behind glass. The rain mechanism still worked. I could have disconnected it. I chose not to. Months later, another storm moved across Arden Falls. I sat alone in the dining room as rain filled the copper basin beneath the house. The cable tightened. The hidden strikers moved. Tap, tap, tap. The sound no longer made me wonder what was trapped inside the wall. The wall had never been hiding a body. It had been hiding a choice. For decades, everyone who knew the truth had believed silence protected someone. Vivian protected my mother. My grandfather protected Vivian. My mother protected the memory of Celia. Martin claimed he protected innocent property owners, but the house had been built to outlast all of them. Each storm tested the mechanism. Each storm asked whether someone was finally ready to listen, and eventually someone was.